think the biggest thing, especially for business aviation, is we're going to need about 250,000 new new personnel by 2038.
Good morning. This is Tom Alston, and I have Amanda Ferraro from Aviation Safety Solutions on this morning's webinar. She's doing a follow-up for her industry best practices regarding the pilot shortage. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to play you a little video about what we're doing and what we're trying to accomplish. So here we go.
Welcome to another Aero Marine free webinar. Let me tell you who we are. We help people who are buying aircraft, vessels, and vehicles to legally avoid the California tax. Just because you're a non-resident of California doesn't mean you're not subject to their assessment. So be smart about all of that. We do these for you because we're trying to give you free information. We do this all the time because you need it, because you've asked for it. And if you've got any subjects that you'd like us to cover that you haven't heard us cover in the past, just send me an email or send an email to Kelsey or call us at 916-691-9192 and we'll get you the information that you asked for.
So there's my little promo piece about these webinars. I mean it sincerely from my heart. If you have any subject that you want covered, just ask and we'll find you what we consider to be an expert in the area of that you need the questions answered. And if you aren't sure who that guy was, that was me 45 pounds ago. I'm in the middle of a goal to lose 80 pounds. So that's what I just have to promote myself because I think I'm doing well. So here is Amanda. Amanda, don't forget to turn your mic back on.
Hi, good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to the follow-on to the industry best practices for the pilot shortage. I am the CEO of Aviation Safety Solutions. My business offers lead ISBAO consulting and auditing to our industry, as well as Wyvern lead audits. My business also works with many Fortune and Part 135 organizations to help them build better standards in our industry above the FAA standards, and also work with many operators to assist them in getting ready for their audits. A little bit about my background. I'm a G550, G450 international captain, still active and current on the aircraft. I do contract flying right now. I feel it's a huge benefit to my operators when I'm current in the airplane and current in the cockpit. I can bring a lot of experience and expertise to the table from an operations side into my business and help infiltrate that into the industry. My business is getting ready to roll out a new program to our operators. So any operator that's looking for hand-holding throughout the year, it's the Safety Assistance Program. I have my first 2 commitments from operators, and what that Safety Assistance Program is going to lean to do is going to help operators throughout the year with their safety manager, working alongside their safety manager, and helping them either implement ISBAO, improve their ISBAO program, and or take away some of the time that is required to get ready for your ISBAO audits. The program is perfect for operators that maybe are having some struggles in the industry when it comes to leadership or a lot of changeover, or there's a lot of change and a lot of influx in the organization. Also, those operators that just want to get their pilots back to flying instead of doing all these safety duties, we are going to help assist in those safety duties and take some of those duties and some of that pressure off the operator. So it's going to be it's the first in the kind program in our industry, and I'm very excited to announce this program. So any organization that needs help with getting ready for your audits or a safety management program, or could use the assistance of an expert kind of standing alongside your team, it'll be a wonderful program to be involved with. And there's various levels and packages available. My background, I worked with FedEx, American Family Insurance, John Deere, and Cessna Aircraft Company. I left FedEx because my business, I'm very honored, was chosen to work with AirInc Direct, or as we now know as Collins Aerospace, and they've been a wonderful industry partner and very excited to continue to work with them in our industry. My business is a preferred vendor for AirInc Direct customers to get their ISBAO audits as well as safety consultation and consulting. What we're going to talk about is a follow-on to the last webinar that we did for the pilot shortage. So we're going to talk about what's causing the shortage briefly, the forecast outlook, the airline hiring practices, and then the business aviation best practices that I'm seeing in the industry with a lot of my clients that I'm working for. And then I always like to end with a question and answer session. If there's anybody out there that has any questions, you can do the chat. I do have it up here, so we can do the chat feature, or you can have the opportunity to ask those questions at the end of this presentation. So I just want to take everybody back to what's causing our talent shortage and what's causing the pilot shortage. As we all know, 9/11 happened. That was really the first beginning spearhead for this pilot shortage. And then in 2009, we had the mandatory retirement age change from 60 to 65. And then shortly after that, the Colgan air crash changed the regulations from 250 hours commercial certificate to 1,500 hours and an ATP. And those pilots have to, at the time that happened, those pilots that are coming into the industry have to work longer, and they have to be, either a flight instructor or some type of commercial pilot before they can go into the regional airlines. So we've got a lot of things going on all at once. We've got a bunch of pilots retiring. We have a bunch of pilots that are still having to push their training back to get those 1,500 hours and an ATP certificate. We also have some growth going on in our industry. The projection by Boeing is that the fleet size is going to double, travel is going to increase, and a lot of other things that are going to be happening all at the same time, really within the next 10 to 15 years. The Boeing projection is, this is the pilot and technician outlook right now. I think the biggest thing, especially for business aviation, is we're going to need about 250,000 new personnel by 2038, and that's significant. That's cabin crew, technicians, and pilots. When we look at North America alone, we're looking at 500,000. That's a lot. That's a lot of individuals that we need in our industry. I think one of the most staggering statistics, if you take a look, is the projected pilot retirement. Right now, we're about 5,000, 6,000 a year at the moment for airline retirements. If you look 10 years out, we're looking at just under 30,000 pilot retirements. And we're not bringing in nearly enough pilots into the industry due to the financial cost, due to accessibility, and the requirements to be a pilot, as well as be a mechanic. It takes a very long time for a skilled aviation personnel to enter our industry, not only from a financial aspect, but also from a training aspect and an experience aspect. Just because you get your ATP and 1,500 hours doesn't necessarily mean you're ready to go fly in the left seat and have all the experience. You need to have those years behind you as a pilot or as an aircraft mechanic. So I love to pose this question. This is in regards to who doesn't have a talent shortage or a pilot shortage right now. And I spoke at North Texas Business Aviation Association and did this presentation. And in the audience, I had so many different, people shouting out answers. And it was, this, that, and the other. And the one thing I want everybody to know is that it's the major airlines. So what we're talking about, it's not the regional airlines. We're talking about Delta. We're talking about United. We're talking about FedEx, UPS. The major airlines do not have a talent shortage right now. And the question is why? Why don't they have a talent shortage? And how do we account for that? When I went through FedEx's training program, they had 10,000 pilots in the queue ready to choose from an interview standpoint. And there's something that the major airlines know about our industry, and specifically about pilots. They know that there are specific things that pilots look for when they're looking for jobs, especially when there's a shortage. And they've been able to actually offer those things to the pilots. And I think knowledge is powerful and education is powerful. And so I want to review some of those things as to why the major airlines, at least for now, they don't have a talent shortage. Now down the road, they may have a talent shortage. They are worried about this. This is something that when you go to conferences, you see them talking about it. They're trying different ways within their union contracts to make it more attractive for pilots, and really try to tackle this in different ways. And when I was teaching this at North Texas, I had mentioned to the crowd, I said, "We'll do what the airlines do, right? They offer sign-on bonuses. They offer, different types of pay packages and things like that." And I call it creative thought leadership when it comes to how to tackle this. And, a flight department or an organization may not be able to do everything that the airlines are doing, but could they do some of the things, or could they be creative in the way that they tackle this? So as far as when pilots are seeking employment, in order of priority, what are pilots looking for? Number one, they're looking for pay. It's the number one thing they look for when they're looking to go to the airlines. They pay really well. In fact, in the last webinar that we did, I showed the pay that FedEx gives their pilots as part of their union contract. They give them taxi pay, they give them over duty time pay, they pay them for everything. In fact, they even pay them for their computerized training every month that they're required to do by the company. I believe it's $125 a session that you do on the computer. They pay them for everything. And so the first thing that I stress is pay. Look at your pay. How are you paying your pilots? What are you paying your pilots? The next one that pilots look for is benefits, insurance, pension, bonuses, family travel, union protection. Pilots will then look at their schedule. They, what type of days off are they going to have, their commuting benefits, if they have any commuting type benefits. Where are they flying out of? Is it easy for them to live where they're at and be able to commute to work? They also look at seniority next. As a pilot grows at a major airline, they start out at the bottom of the pecking order. They have the worst of schedules. They usually are sitting on reserve. They're sitting in the right seat as a first officer for a period of time. Right now, FedEx has an 18-month upgrade to left seat captain, which is actually pretty incredible. That's not normal. And some other airlines, it can be 5 to 10 years out. But with the retirements, what we're seeing is the upgrading from a first officer to a captain has increased significantly in our industry in the last several years. And then the last thing that the pilots are looking for, especially leadership pilots that want to grow beyond the cockpit, is growth and opportunity. There are airlines that will take pilots off of the flight schedule and put them on a project and then return them back to the flight schedule when they're done with the special project. Not all airlines do that, but there are opportunities for leadership growth within those major airline organizations. One of the things that I want to make sure everybody knows is the union contracts for ALPA and for the major airlines are online. You can find those contracts, and I don't think a lot of people know that. You can Google those contracts and they're there. You can find them. I think that's significant to know that, because I think a lot of HR organizations believe that when they start looking at the actual pay metrics of a captain, that pilots are making somewhere, a 15-year captain at FedEx on the 777 can be making anywhere from $300,000 to $350,000, even $400,000 a year, depending upon how they bid their schedule and what type of pay they're receiving. That is not out of the norm. So I want to make sure that those that are listening in and those that see this webinar, if your HR is doubting, what is going on or what is being said in the industry, you can back that up by the actual union contract and take a look at that. The contracts are very lengthy. They're many pages, but you can get down to finding where their type of pay and things are, and you can show that to them if you need to show. So the next question is, what type of pilot is the major airlines recruiting? And I say major. This one also got a lot of responses at North Texas. It was really funny. I think one of the guys had shouted out in the audience. He said, "Everybody, the major airlines are recruiting everybody." And I said, no, actually, they're looking for specific pilots. I don't know if everybody knows this, but in order to get hired at a major airline, you have to have a 4-year degree as a pilot. You have to. Unless you're the spaceship shuttle commander and you've done something really spectacular in your lifetime, which is the majority of pilots that are not, pilots are required at this point in time to have a 4-year degree. But they're also looking for other things beyond the 4-year degree. They're looking for your leadership level pilots. They're looking for pilots that will drive their organizations into the future. So they're looking for chief pilots, they're looking for safety officer, safety manager type pilots. They're looking for your management level pilots, anybody that has significant military background, and then also pilots that have earned significant awards, volunteer time, and maybe other expertise beyond the cockpit. So that's important to know, that the pilots in your organization that are going to be recruited into the major airlines are going to be your leadership pilots. And we're going to talk about that because that's going to be a significant impact to your organization when and if they do take your leadership level pilots out of your organization. I want to get right into best practices for our industry. I think this is really the meat and potatoes of what's going on. This is what I'm seeing with my clients, and I've talked to a lot of chief pilots and directors that I work with, and I want to make sure that we go through this and we have enough time to review these items, and then I'm expecting there may be a couple questions on this. So the first thing, the first number one thing on this list is you need to look at your pay. You need to look at what the major airlines are paying your pilots, and you need to look at what you are paying your pilots. This is by and far the biggest thing. The organizations, what I'm seeing, the organizations that are kind of out by themselves and are very rural in their areas are struggling, and they struggle with this because they don't have a lot of benchmarking with local organizations. They don't have a pilot pool to pull from. They also may not, find a local pilot with enough hours. So increasing your pay, if you can, will be one of the biggest things that you can do from a hiring standpoint and bringing talent in. I had another group tell me that they wish that they would have increased their pay prior to posting, because they lost 3 candidates during that time frame. So they lost all that time doing the interviews with the team and setting aside days to do interviews and bring pilots in. And then at the end of the day, they weren't able to offer enough. So they had quite a few pilots that were very qualified actually walk away. Look at your current benefits package. I call this creative thought leadership. Look at your benefits package. What can you do differently? Is there anything that you can do when it comes to working with your HR department? Could you do something or increase 401k? Could you increase the bonuses or the profit sharing? The regional airlines are heavily recruiting pilots via the mail. They're sending out postcards to everybody, including me. I think I've received like 10 of them by now. But they say that we're going to do a sign-on bonus. Could you do something like that? Do what the airlines do. Could you offer a yearly bonus? Some airlines are offering now yearly bonuses to their pilots. Could you do something in the way of stock options or insurance offerings? FedEx has 5 different health insurance plans to choose from. I know that this is usually a corporate level structure, but in our smaller organizations, this could be an area that you could look at. Also, retiree health insurance. That's a benefit of a FedEx pilot. Pension. How about a moving package for a new hire pilot? Or helping with education-related expenses for maybe moving forward with their education, paying for some of their training. Pilot disability insurance. This is a big one in corporate aviation and business aviation. The majority of insurance that's offered at a Fortune type level company does not cover a pilot in the event that they were to have a loss of medical. It's been proven many times in many organizations that long-term or short-term disability insurance will not cover a pilot for a loss of license. They call it a loss of license, but it's a loss of medical. So it is something as an organization, could you help, or could you look into an extra benefit along those lines? And then working from home, that's another area in which you could examine. Could you look at the schedule? Could you provide firm days off or a schedule swap with other crew members? Or could you have your pilots self-schedule? This was one of the areas when I worked with American Family I brought to the table for our team, and it worked wonderful for our team. We had a small group. Now, in some organizations, allowing your pilots to put themselves on the schedule will not work, especially if you're an organization of 100 to 200 people. But if you have a small organization, is it possible that you could allow your pilots to put themselves on the schedule? That allows for flexibility. It allows for the pilots to be able to work amongst themselves. If you have good synergy with the group and they work well, allowing pilots to potentially self-schedule is a great way to do that. And I'm more than willing to talk to anybody about how we went about doing that and the framework in which we set up to be able to allow our pilots to go ahead and self-schedule. There has to be some framework around that so that there's definitely some restrictions and you're watching duty time and things like that. So when you're recruiting for new positions, could you use Facebook as recruiting? There are Facebook groups out there for pilot jobs, Gulfstream pilots, female aviators sticking together, aviation career mentorship. You want to be where the pilots are. And the majority of pilots that are coming into our industry that are new pilots are going to be on social media. So you want to be there. That's where you want to be. Corporate aviation job listings, there's private jet crews. The CAJL is the Scheduler Dispatchers Flight Operations Network. You could use your NBAA. They have a job posting section on NBAA. The regional aviation groups, so Georgia Business Aviation, Chicago Business Aviation Association, there's a Pacific Aviation Association, Washington, D.C., North Texas. I mean, there's so many regional aviation groups that you could promote your position to. LinkedIn is another great way to promote your positions available. Attending regional aviation events and having attendance there. National aviation events, so we just completed BASE here last month. And one of the things that I want to stress is when you are recruiting for new positions, be clear what your salary range is. Be clear what the benefits you're offering in the posting. And when you're talking to the pilots, there's nothing worse than having and spending all the time to bring a pilot in, go through their resume, have them come and do a full day with the team, and then you come to find out that your expectations and their expectations don't align. You've just spent a lot of time and energy with the team and having them come in to, frankly, do an interview that's not going anywhere. So the airlines are very clear and are very upfront about what salary range and what benefits they are offering to pilots. And I'm stressing and encouraging you guys to do the same because it will help with time. It's one of the biggest things that I think when we've got organizations recruiting, just be very upfront with it. Don't dance around it. Utilize social media. This is across all platforms. Your young pilots coming in are by and far, they're on social media, be where they are. So any way that you can figure out where those pilots might be, use those platforms. Benchmark, if you have the opportunity to benchmark with local and regional departments. This is really important. The salary surveys, and I'm going to talk about that in just a little bit, but the salary surveys may not necessarily be in line with your salary in your area, with the different levels of the living cost of living and where you're located. If you're in rural or if you're in a large city, there's big significant differences between where I'm at in Wisconsin and being out in California and the cost of living associated with that and what departments are offering. So benchmark with similar type size, aircraft size, and staffing level size organizations. If you are a small aircraft operator, do not benchmark with a large operator that has many large cabin airplanes. That's not going to work. You need to benchmark with an operator of your similar mission scope, so domestic, international, aircraft size. It might be a small aircraft or it might be a large aircraft, and as well as staffing levels. Some of my clients are actually having visibility with the local and regional flight schools, and I love this. Even though today, those pilots are not ready to come into your organization and fly. Those pilots down the road, as long as the airlines are continuing to recruit, the airlines will always have the in at the flight schools, and the pilots that are coming out of flight school will always have the knowledge that the airlines will exist. And so having visibility with your local and regional aviation schools is very important because it brings visibility to corporate aviation, brings visibility to your organization. So allowing hangar tours, exhibiting at local aviation events. I have a client that goes to a fly-in and it's just there. They're there, they have a booth and they just want to be present. They just want to have the community know that they are alive and they're at the airport and this is where they can find them and they are available for mentoring or questions. And you never know, 10 years from now, 5 years from now, those pilots could be knocking on your front door, having the experience necessary to come work for you. NBAA YoPro, this is another organization that NBAA offers. It's for young professionals and great way to provide visibility to your organization to pilots coming into the industry. And then I've got some groups that offer an internship opportunity, which is very big when it comes to college. You know, the college students love the internship opportunity. It's very popular. Even though you may select one or two individuals for the internship, the visibility surrounding the opportunity for the internship is tenfold compared to just bringing one or two individuals into your organization. So the opportunity for the visibility mentorship and we are here and you guys can hang on us if you need to. We'd love to answer questions for you. Just having kind of those open arms to those pilots coming into the industry is one of the biggest things you can do from an education standpoint. I joked at North Texas that this next bullet point I probably should have put on the first item before increased pay. If you think you're going to go into your HR department without having ever built a relationship with your HR department, you are wrong. This is by far one of the biggest things that you can do if you are in a Fortune company or you are in a large organization. Building a relationship with your HR team and trust and educating them is by far and large the first thing that needs to happen. You cannot expect to walk into your HR department unknown to them and ask for increases in pay, changes in benefits, and a whole new structure to how you're going to bring pilots into your organization. This has to be done over time. This is something that you need to get down to corporate. You need to get yourself your contact person, and you need to take that person out to lunch and spend some time with those people, getting to know them and getting to understand the corporate restrictions around hiring. I see this a lot, and what I see is because aviation organizations are always out to the airport, it's really hard to, bridge that gap. But I highly encourage you that this should be number one on your list. If you are in a large organization or a Fortune company, you need to get out of the hangar building and get down to corporate and start working and building those relationships. It's huge. Look at hiring requirements in your organization. So do you require a bachelor's degree right now? Is that something you necessarily have to have? Is that something that would be the difference between hiring a pilot or not? Would that be something that, could you take an associate's degree versus a bachelor's degree or equivalent experience? Total time. I know a lot of organizations are looking at total time. insurance right now is they're not lowering their minimums for pilots coming into the industry. But if you want a 6,000-hour captain, and you're in a very rural area, that's probably going to be very difficult for you to achieve, especially if you haven't brought pay up to substantiate that. So could you look at overall time? Could you look at the overall experience of the pilot that you're bringing in? The insurance requirements. One of the things that the industry needs to know from an insurance standpoint, because I sit on the Aviation Insurance Association Safety Committee, is from an insurance standpoint, single pilot operations, and the insurance to insure a single pilot operation is going away very quickly. It's becoming harder and harder to insure single pilot jet operations. There's a lot of restrictions around that right now. They're trying to get away from that. Right seat, jump seat program. Look at how you guys, the airline industry does, I believe, a good job mentoring pilots, and I believe that's an area for corporate aviation and business aviation that we can do better on. Could we bring that young, inexperienced pilot into our organization and allow them to sit into the jump seat for a period of time? Could we allow them to sit, a lesser inexperienced pilot in the right seat for a period of years before they would ever touch the left seat? And can we mentor them? The mentoring and the utilization of training, using flight safety or CAE to train those young potential candidates for flight experience. Could you leave them down at flight safety for a month and allow them to fly with different crews and get some of that experience that otherwise they wouldn't have coming into your organization? Mentoring, I am a huge proponent for mentoring. I can't tell you, think about this. If every single person in our industry mentored and brought in 2 people, I'm not sure we'd have a pilot shortage. So when it comes to mentoring, be that person in your organization that shares your knowledge. Be that captain that wants to help bring along the lesser inexperienced pilots in the organization. Be that person that maybe stands up a formalized mentoring program for those pilots. And be that person that reaches out outside of the organization to the industry to help bring in new people. I have brought in over 25 people into our industry as a professional pilot, and I have mentored so many more. I do it. It's part of my weekly. It's part of my weekly work. I just build it in, and it's really important to me. I do a lot of mentoring in the industry. I'm giving back what I've been given. Salary surveys, there's a bunch of salary surveys that you can use from an organizational standpoint. There's Gallagher, NBAA, Pearl Meyer. Those are the 3 top ones. The Pro Pilot one is subjective, so you can use it, but it's typically not at the top of the list for departments or organizations. So utilize salary surveys in addition to your local benchmarking to kind of figure out where you should be in your area. The other area that you can look at is the minority pool to fill the gap. So could you bring a pilot that just retired from the airlines into your organization? Could you look at gender or a military veteran or somebody that's just coming out of the military or somebody of different race? I think the minority pool to help fill in our aviation gaps is huge. There was a statistic that I read from a technician standpoint, from a maintenance standpoint, that if we took every single technician that came out of the military that had experience working on airplanes and put them into our A&P certificate, that we wouldn't actually have a shortage. But the problem is the requirements for a military individual that has experience working on airplanes from a maintenance standpoint, to get them to have an A&P, it takes years, and that process is extremely lengthy. But could we do that with pilots? Could we take a military veteran pilot and bring them into our organization? So creative thought leadership, where can we get talent? What types of pools can we get talent from? Take advantage of insurance, safety, and training resources. I think this is really important. If you are with USAIG, Global Aerospace, AIG, they all offer safety and training resources in their portfolios in addition to your insurance. It's important that you take advantage of those credits. There's wonderful training that they offer amongst that grouping. If your insurer is any one of those. When I talk about mentorship and I talk about the kind of pilots that are going to be leaving your organization, let's talk about leadership. If you know that after this presentation that you think that you're going to have changeover from a pilot perspective, from pilots leaving your organization, you need to fill that gap. It's so important. When I was at American Family, I brought the idea to cross-train our staff into various roles. And it served multi-purpose function. It served for leadership development. We had a lot of pilots that really wanted to be developed outside the cockpit, and they wanted different expertise outside of just flying the Gulf Stream. The leadership development to help increase your staff's knowledge is important. But also what it does is when you have a loss of a staff member, you want to fill in that knowledge gap. So if your safety officer leaves your organization and you've stood up a program where you cross-train your staff into the various roles, the organization will not suffer the loss of that knowledge gap, because that expertise, no matter if it's a safety role or a security role, or if you have an international expertise, expert amongst the group, if you are cross-training and mentoring your pilots and swapping those roles and getting them the experience, you will be able to fill in that knowledge gap, and you'll be able, from a safety standpoint, be able to move forward very quickly without having a lot of disruption in your organization. I'd be more than willing to talk with anybody about what we did at American Family when I was there. I brought the idea to the table that we were going to split our pilots into various expertise function roles, and we swapped those roles, and it was really great. It provided a lot of knowledge sharing amongst the team and development of the pilots. So more than welcome to share with anybody that's listening in. You're welcome to contact me about that. Participating in ISBAO and establishing industry best practices. For those of you that are listening in that don't have a structured program, ISBAO is by and far a wonderful program to be a part of. It certainly allows for new and inexperienced pilots to have structure. It allows for your pilots to have a very positive and developed safety culture. It's a non-blame type of a culture. And it's a standard above the FAA. It's very important that looking at a program like this is important for your organization.
Amanda?
Yes.
Could you, for the benefit of our listeners, define what ISBAO stands for?
Yeah, it's the International Standard for Business Aviation Operations, okay. And it's administered by IBAC. And IBAC sits with in an observer status with ICAO. So ICAO is I call it the FAA of the world, right? They're essentially the organization that sits across the entire world and makes rules about how we fly our airplanes overseas. And IBAC has an observer status, a permanent observer status on the board. And IBAC has developed an ISBAO program, and it consists of two things. It consists of having a safety management program, and it consists of industry best practices for how we operate airplanes. And so in many cases, organizations that voluntarily submit to this program decide that they want to be in a standard above the FAA level. And it'll help them maintain safety management. Pretty much any operator that's flying a jet, that's flying either overseas or Part 91 operators that are going to be flying anything over 12,500 pounds in the United States in the next probably 5 to 10 years will be required to have an SMS program in place. So if we have operators that don't have that in place, it's necessary that we get started on it, because it does take some time. It does take a process to get this program in place and get your safety program put in place, because there's a lot of components to it.
Got it.
Calculate the cost of your turnover. By far, how much does it really cost you to retrain versus retain? And when you're talking about a pilot that has 10 years of captain experience, you've probably by that point probably put in about $3 million worth of training into them and experience and time lost trying to find a new pilot, as well as the safety of your organization. When you have that level of a pilot that leaves your organization, the hole that it leaves for your team is extremely stressful, and it puts a lot of stress on your organization. So calculate how much does it really cost you to retain an increased salary and increased benefits versus retrain a new pilot and all those years of experience. I guarantee you, as you sit down and you work through those numbers, the numbers are staggering to try to just bring a new, younger, inexperienced pilot into the organization and try to get them the level of experience that you just lost in the organization. I want to end with don't hire out of desperation. I think there's a lot of things that from an organizational level that we can do to really help with this pilot shortage. I think knowledge, like I said, is very powerful. Creative thought leadership is really important here, and looking at what you're offering, what you could offer, looking at all facets of this from every angle. Never sacrifice safety. Never bring a pilot in that is not qualified to do what they're doing. Get them the experience if you need to. Don't just sacrifice your safety margins just because you need to fill a seat. So be proactive. Seek out your candidates before you have to hire. Know those candidates. Get to know them. Mentor them. It's a wonderful way to develop a relationship with pilots in your area. So I'm going to end with this. How are you shielding your organization against the talent shortage? And what steps have you taken, if any? I think it's an important question to ponder. I'm always open to questions if anybody has any. And if there's anybody beyond this or that is watching this after the fact, I'm open for comments, suggestions, ideas, and help. More than willing to share.
You see that question just popped up?
I do. Give me 1 second. Let me read it. So there's a lot of opportunities for pilots that the question is, there's an individual retiring from finance and they want to get a job flying, and they have a commercial rotorcraft and commercial single engine, about 1,000 hours. What other paths other than the regional major airline opportunities? What other paths are there for older pilots as well as pilots that have about 1,000 hours of experience? There's a lot of organizations that will allow pilots to sit in the right seat, or you can become a flight instructor if that to build your time, because essentially what we're talking about here is building some more time. We need about 500 more hours, maybe 1,000 more hours. So reaching out, there's banner towing, there's glider towing. If you can find a owner that has a small aircraft that would allow you to fly as a second in command, maybe get you a second in command type rating. The biggest thing I can tell you is networking. It's huge. It's one of the biggest things that I stress when I'm mentoring pilots. Going on NBAA, finding out who's in your area. NBAA has a member directory, and finding out who is in the area, who's at your local airports, who owns airplanes. Start getting yourself out and introducing yourself. Corporate aviation flight departments as well as business aviation organizations, they do not want to hire somebody they don't know. They want to make sure you're a good fit. They want to make sure that it's a long term. So getting yourself out to the regional events is huge. And I'm more than willing to take your comments or questions after the webinar. Second question, I'm curious what your thoughts or recommendations would be for early 50-ish second career. So kind of along the same lines. I think I understand that to be similar to you're looking at maybe being a pilot early in your 50s. business aviation has become very open to the older generation. I cannot tell you how many pilots I'm seeing being pulled into business aviation to help with the pilot shortage. So as part of the minority pool, the age is, it's great. So get out there and introduce yourself. Networking, network. I can't stress that enough. Civil Air Patrol. I am a recipient of Civil Air Patrol. Actually, I was the cadet commander growing up and did my flight training through Civil Air Patrol. The question is, my son augments flight instruction with CAP, depends on where one lives, and that is absolutely correct. I got my private pilot certificate through Civil Air Patrol and started my flight training actually through our local Civil Air Patrol unit. So Civil Air Patrol is an auxiliary of the United States Air Force. It's a volunteer organization, and they have a flight training program, and most local organizations have an airplane accessible so that the kids can start learning how to fly. And it's an absolutely wonderful thing. So I highly suggest that as well. Civil Air Patrol is a great organization to get some experience and time. All right, any other questions?
I have a question. It may not be exactly in the vein of what you were thinking about, but do you think that if the pilot shortage breaches into the major airlines, that they're going to start looking at pilotless aircraft?
Yes. That was one of the areas we touched on in the last webinar. There is no doubt that having one pilot in the cockpit versus two pilots in the cockpit will help with the shortage. That technology is being developed right now. It's on the horizon. Drones have really spearheaded that, Tom. It's definitely, it's being tested right now in our industry. We are a ways from it, though. To tell you that we are close to a single pilot large aircraft operation is far from the truth. We're a ways from that type of an operation. But I do believe in my lifetime before I retire that we will see that as the next piece of technology in the cockpits. We're seeing a lot of automation, a lot of new technology being brought in to aviation, and that's no exception. The drone industry will spearhead that technology in our airplanes for sure.
Okay. I want to remind everyone who's on this webinar that you've got an absolute perfect chance to ask one of the leading experts in the world about this subject. If you continue to ask her questions, we're going to be on for maybe a couple more minutes. Please, type your questions in and let's get them answered.
As a side note, since we're waiting, Tom, for those operators that are looking for additional resources, a place to collaborate, if you're looking at getting into ISBAO, I've created a Facebook group page with a ton of resources. And what I mean is I have posted everything from fatigue metric manuals to the new EASA ramp inspection manual that was just published in September, to how to conform and different ways in which you can conform to some of the requirements of ISBAO, how to get ready for your audit. I did a webinar on that and recorded it. Also, some of the intricacies of a safety program, a safety management program. So there is a ton, and I mean a ton of resources on that Facebook page. And feel free to search under Facebook groups ISBAO operators. I will accept you, and the items that are in that group are free for operators to choose from and take and utilize within their own organization. And then also, I've got some groups that will post out questions, how are other groups dealing with such and such, or we have this issue, can somebody help? So it's a great collaboration tool. I've got maybe 170 individuals that are subscribed to that group and watch it on a weekly basis.
Well done, well done. And I'm going to say this again. You have an opportunity to talk to someone who's got her finger on the pulse of what's going on. She's giving this information away to you for free, and it's very, very pro-survival. It will help you gain more knowledge about what you're doing and continue this industry into the future. So I'm going to give you like 60 more seconds, so make sure we don't miss any questions, and then we're going to end today's event. And while we're doing that, I'm going to fill in a little bit here. Amanda, thank you very, very, very much for your time. It's been a pleasure getting to know you, and I totally support what you're doing. And everybody who's listening to this, this is being recorded, and it's going to be available on our website. We'll have it up and out in your hands in no time at all. Well, Amanda, I guess nobody has any more questions. You did such a great job of explaining everything that everybody understands it completely.
And Tom, if anybody has any questions on the back side of this, I am available to answer questions either on the pilot shortage or talent shortage, the airlines, or if it comes to safety consulting issues, or you need help standing up your ISBAO program, or you're looking for an ISBAO audit.
Okay, one last thing. If you're a contract pilot, they can also contact you if they want to hire you, right?
Yes, sir. I do left seat. I'm qualified and current left seat in the Gulfstream 450 and 550. I'm headed to Finland here in a couple weeks with my favorite operator, and they know who they are. And I just come back from Australia and Indonesia, so I get an opportunity to travel the world with just some absolutely wonderful operators. So I do contract pilot work, and I'm registered with all the major contract organizations in our industry.
Excellent. Well, I think our time together has come to an end. So thank you for your time, and I will be ending this event.
Thanks, Tom.
Bye-bye.